Hi everybody, thanks for clicking my video. I'm Jackson, and today I want to ask and hopefully answer the question, can you play Dungeons & Dragons in the Stormlight Archive? So, Stormlight Archive is a series of novels from beloved modern fantasy author Brandon Sanderson. Brandon is very much a geek like you and me. He plays Magic the Gathering and, wouldn't you know it, D&D. And a lot of his books read like brilliantly executed prose of magical rule systems, and I would go as far as say combat turns. It's not as popular an IP as a lot of the series that I may talk about on this channel, but we should expect a movie or a TV series in a few years, so if you want to get ahead of that, you can check out the books. If you want to read the books, just be warned. They are long, 1,000-page tomes, and they jump around lots of different POV characters. I do recommend the series, but I'm mostly here to talk about the D&D side of things as a professional dungeon master, so I am going to leave a why you should read video for Stormlight from bigger YouTuber Daniel Green in the description. In short, Stormlight is a lot to get into, but I think it's very much worth it. I'm actually going to give a spoiler warning with this video. The Stormlight Archive is a dense and transformative story. It snowballs from the first chapter on. I think that journey is worth taking. I am going to try to keep my comments to the first book only, but even the little comments that I make may reveal a slight hint that you won't get at just the right time the story and Brandon wants you to if you were to jump on the novels. So if you want to be totally pure, 0% spoilers, you can skip to the final score. I'm going to be talking about my stats here for as a DM. Should you run this as your D&D setting, those stats are going to be concept, exploration, equipment, magic, backgrounds, lineages, classes, content, monsters, and flavor. So let's talk about some stats. First up is concept, and I am giving this a 5 out of 10. Hear me out. Ordinary people discover latent magical powers as they discover their true selves and overcome tragic backstories. It's not the most original pitch. The setting of Roshar, the actual world of Stormlight, at first glance doesn't seem to be the most interesting world either. Stormlight shines in the depth of its world and its characters, but at first a windy world filled with crab things and some war and stuff, it's not that engaging. Still, there is a promise of a deep and effective story, an ongoing war, magical mysteries, and unknown powers. That stuff is all intriguing, so I'm still giving it, a 5 out of 10, not lower. Let's go to exploration. This one, I'm giving a 10 out of 10. We have a detailed map of Roshar straight out of the books, just like Lord of the Rings. Specific locations like the battlefields of the Shattered Plains or the seaside streets of Kharbranth are alive and ready for adventure. Travel plays a role in the story for sure, and the environment provides unique challenges like avoiding a high storm. There are magical places and creatures aplenty. Best yet, the world still has uncovered territory that we don't see in the books that I think you can feel free in exploring around in. Talking about equipment, this is going to be a 7 out of 10. So weapons, armor, and wondrous items are ready to use out of the book with very little effort. Little things like clothes and books matter, which I love as somebody who wants your 50 feet of hempen rope to help you in a situation. There's a unique currency focused around gems and the magical light stored in them for extra fun and immersion. However, here's why this is a 7 and not a 10. A few items are very specific and potentially game-breaking. Shard blades are monstrosities that are horrific to read about and I would actually say boring to play with. Imagine a great sword, D&D players, that ignores armor and kills or maims you upon contact. Plus it has very little weight, so there's no restriction and probably a +3 attack bonus. It's not fun to say, and I nuke the goblins. And that's the problem that we get into with shard blades and shard plate. It seems cool, but in practice, where I've seen stuff like this happen, it's going to be a setback. Let's chat about magic, and this one is going to be a 5 out of 10. Hang on, don't crucify me. Sanderson stands. So readers know that Brandon Sanderson knows how to write a 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 magic system. I'm not questioning that. The 5 out of 10 problem is that that will clash with the game you're trying to run and play in, which is 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. You can cast Levitate and call it a lashing, but going through that list of spells like that is pretty finite. It's not going to get you very far. The detailed magic system of Stormlight provides the strongest argument, I think, for it to get its own RPG, or better yet, a Cosmere RPG, which, by the way, the Cosmere is the planar multiverse that most of Sanderson's works occupy. Did I mention he's a geek like us? Let's chat about backgrounds. Yeah, this is an 11 out of 10. Backgrounds are a major factor to the characters, and characters are the focus of Stormlight Archive. We see nobles and urchins and the like, but none of the characters are just one thing, which really shows how to heighten 5th edition backgrounds using the tools already in the player handbook. For example, the noble is illiterate, and the urchin has proficiency with surgeon's tools. Layers are good in fiction writing, and they're good in your D&D game. Lineages, I got another 5 out of 10. So this one is very similar to the magic rating. Yes, Roshar has many interesting and diverse humanoid races. The plated Parshendi, who harmonize their battle songs. Rock-toothed, burly, redhead horn-eaters, and more. Tons of them. However, it's easy to say that your horn-eater character is a Goliath, and not so easy to call the musical crabs like lizard folk or something. My usual advice for this is not to overthink your lineage stats if you're doing like a custom lineage for your table, but with Stormlight, there are some real racial abilities that I think deserve their own stats and balance, and that's something you'll need to find or create, so that's more work for you as a DM or for your players. Plus, most of the different races are actually just humans, but with feathers for eyebrows and no other distinct features. Moving on, classes. This is going to be a 7 out of 10. So we see Barbarian, Bard, Wit, great character, quite the vicious mocker, and not beyond a little flirting with nobility. So there is a Bard. Fighter, we see Monk and Rogue, all present. Clerics are there. They aren't really magical unless the Artificer makes them a Fabrial. When we start meeting spellcasters in Roshar, in the books they're called Surgebinders. Class gets very muddled. Most of them are Gish builds with a very unique subset of spells. The prologue, so I'm really not spoiling much here, features a man named Seth Sun Villano who uses gravity spells and an artifact sword to absolutely decimate martial veterans. And you can easily see like building this character as a blade singer or a hex blade and cast gravity spells, sure. The problem is the further we go on, spoiler warning, a lot of characters start to look like that, to the point that a spell-restricted blade singer doesn't fit so well, and we have to make, I think, a homebrew class. Add in the fact that many of the characters are paladins, if only for the flavor win of swearing an oath to gain their abilities. Later Stormlight actually has its own explicit class system. Trust me, no further spoilers. Moving on. 7 out of 10 for classes. Content. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. So Stormlight is plenty violent in a way that I think isn't gratuitous, but it makes you think about mortality. That is actually, I think, a more mature way that can be troubling to some people who just want to sit down and have a chill time playing D&D. Aspects of mental health, like PTSD and depression, are pretty explicitly delved into in the characters, but that's not a far cry from what we see in like Critical Role. There are also some insightful discussions on racism, sexism, and slavery. All of this is handled very, very well in the books and may even provide a blueprint of how to maturely approach R-rated topics at your table. But I just know that some players would rather not have these elements at all, so docking it a little, but still 8 out of 10. The content is not going to be too much of a hurdle to adapt. Monsters. I'm going to give the monsters in Stormlight a 9 out of 10. Here's why. Humanoid noble shard bearers with those big crazy game breaking swords I was talking about are the biggest, scariest monsters in the universe, and I love that from a thematic standpoint. Fights, tactics, and positioning all matter in small unit battles, which is what you should be having with your D&D party. There are plenty of crab-like aberrations. Spren can take on these stat blocks. I love Spren. They can take on the stat blocks of different fae and elementals, although they're not quite things to fight, really. Chasm fiends are a perfect monster fight. Beautiful. And there are stories about ancient, or I would say even eldritch, titans that may still reside in uninhabited corners of oceans and mountains. Really good monster fodder. Great action start point. Flavor. This one's going to be an 8 out of 10. So Stormlight isn't just detailed on character description. Different cultures seem real, down to dining customs and musical instruments. Slain creatures hold magical gem hearts. Magic is cast using devices called soul casters. You can feel not only the rules of Sanderson's magic systems and arcane weather, but feel the wonder behind every aspect of the world. And wonder is something you should want at your table that I find missing at a lot of them. So flavor is pretty darn good, y'all. It's 8 out of 10. And that is going to bring us to the final tally. This says 75. Pretty good. So Stormlight Archive is playable as your D&D setting, absolutely. However, there will be plenty to contend with when you start to realize the existing spell and class rules don't mesh super great. Stormlight, I think, deserves its own tabletop RPG, but until then, you and your friends could have a lot of fun tweaking D&D 5th edition to fit this majestic fantasy world, while your PCs have introspective anime fights. So absolutely go for it. And thank you again for checking out my video. And if you haven't already, I hope you check out one of the Stormlight books. They're good stuff. One of the best modern authors we have right now. And it's an ongoing series that you can get started in on. Thank you again. Give yourself advantage and have a nat 20 day. Bye-bye.